Welcome to the TBR studio. Over the last few weeks, I've been sitting down with a bunch of my colleagues to talk about generative AI, of course. Back in December, we published a market landscape that we looked at generative AI through a bunch of different lenses all around the practices that we have here at TBR. So we looked at it from a digital transformation perspective. We looked at it from IT services and professional services. We looked at it from cloud and software, from infrastructure, and from, of course, telecoms. And so I sat down with the leaders of each of those practices to talk about what they saw in generative AI in 2023, what they see at the beginning of 2024, and what they expect for the rest of this year. So enjoy all the videos, enjoy all the chats, and if you have specific questions after you've watched them, feel free to reach out to the analysts, feel free to reach out to TBR and get a hold of our research, take a further look at it, and also get your questions answered. Thanks. Boz, in your research for the generative AI and artificial intelligence market landscape over the course of the last year, what really surprised you? What stood out?
That's an interesting question. Just going over and thinking about that research and what we have observed in the last decade, and thinking about all the waves of new technologies. I hate to say, but nothing surprised me. Meaning, I don't want to sound like, just I know it all, but in terms of what I said, what I mean nothing surprised me is that vendors are not acting differently. That's what I mean by not surprised me. Meaning that they still make their big splashy marketing announcements. They still make announcements they are investing in people, okay, which is important. They're investing in technology offerings, important. Investing in partnership, important. But if you remove GenAI in the sentence and put metaverse in 2022, you heard the same, and you remove that back in 2021 with whatever the technology sustainability was back, 2021 was the technology or solution or framework du jour, same thing. So the behavior did not surprise me. The opportunity of the technology is different, with no doubt about it.
Right.
And I think that needs to come through a little bit differently when it comes to the messaging. It deserves a different approach, potentially, from how the technology is being positioned, how much is the hype being talked through versus what the opportunity is. So on one end is the story around GenAI, on the other end is the strategy around GenAI. And everyone is racing to make an announcement without really, proving, where things are moving, what direction, and the technology deserves so much more because the potential is so much greater than any other technologies that we may have experienced in the past. So there is the recognition that technology can do more,
Right.
but the approach the vendors are taking is very similar to the way they have done business so far with any other technology. So it's kind of like almost diminishes that opportunity.
But that makes next year challenging because we look at individual vendors and try to understand how they're different, how their strategies are different, how they're behaving differently, and what that will mean within the broader ecosystem. So are there any vendors at this point today that you can point to and say in 2024, they will be a standout vendor in the IT services, consulting, digital transformation space with respect to generative artificial intelligence?
I think there will be a new way of thinking about how vendors do business, with who they do business with, less so about being a vendor that is going to stand out in particular. So take, for example, NVIDIA. That was a vendor that everyone was aware of, everyone was partnering with, everyone was investing and was aware of, just thinking about what was their place in the ecosystem, right? We heard about NVIDIA so much more in 2023, and I would expect we're going to hear even more in 2024. So if you take that as the kind of the pillar of GenAI, kind of enablement, I would expect to see vendors think differently about how they partner with someone like NVIDIA. I'll be expecting to think about how they go to market with someone like NVIDIA. Obviously, they're not going to give up on their existing partnerships with the hyperscalers or any ISVs that they might be there, because everybody is investing in a similar fashion and trying to go up against NVIDIA in some capacity,
Right.
with producing chips cheaper, faster, and whatnot. And so, is there a particular vendor that is standing out from the crowd that has done anything different in 2023 that's going to make it different? I think it's the vendors that are thinking differently about who else they should be partnering beyond their existing ecosystem partners are the one that may be having a little bit a better shot at. Vendors have different backgrounds.
Right.
The India-centric vendors have a very strong engineering background. I think that's a leg up for them right now because GenAI requires some engineering skills that many may not have. Same time, consultancies still have a strong governance, risk and compliance practices, which is an important piece of the puzzle for establishing governance in the models. I think they still have they could experience some rebound in consulting in 2024.
Right.
In the middle, the integration vendors, system integrators, they can position themselves if they want to succeed more. They need to think about again what are the layers of IT complexity essentially that GenAI creates,
Right.
And who are the key players that are part of that complexity and how do they partner with them.
I think it's interesting how much the ecosystem has been about who plays nicely, and now we're moving to who can expand their playmates, who can gather more playmates in the sandbox. Okay, Alan, for our generative AI and artificial intelligence market landscape in December, leading up to that research, what were some of the things that surprised you looking at generative AI and AI from the cloud and software perspective?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest surprises were around the way that monetization is actually occurring. So for our research, it's all about the business, the financials, and how organizations are making money in the technology space. And the variety of different packaging methods, solutioning, pricing, whether it's built into the underlying offering, whether it's a new premium tier of a service, or whether it's an entirely separate capability, all of those models exist today.
Right.
So there's not one that's really driving the way that money is being made with AI, at least to start.
That's such a good point because it felt like in the summer of 2023, there was so much hype. It was like everybody must be making money like crazy. And the truth is, of course, nobody was really making all that much money. And we had to figure out how it was really going to happen. So now we're going into the next iteration of this report. What do you think are the trends that are driving change now that you think you're gonna focus on in the next report and then continue to evaluate over the course of 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the easiest part of the market is being developed as we speak. So adding it into existing solutions as an enabler, a complement, something that increases productivity for a set of users and a set of functions that's already happening today.
Right.
That's a fairly low barrier to entry to get started with some of these AI capabilities. Where a lot of the development and value over the long term for AI, it's going to come for organizations doing their own custom models, having their own proprietary data be a part of that, and actually having business cases that they're responsible for the development and really developing a solution that aligns to their business. So that's the longer term value. Obviously, very much more difficult to get started when a lot of the onus is on these organizations. They're still running their business, but now need to find resources and a strategy for finding the right use cases, developing the technology to support that, maintaining their data privacy up to their standards, and then getting started with things that actually touch the business.
Quick follow-up question. You mentioned resources. Is the talent out there, or is there going to be a talent war around generative AI?
I think there's already a talent war around generative AI. We saw it even historically with some of the data science engineers. That was AI in a lot of cases, and those were highly paid positions, very challenging to retain, a lot of competition. So I think you're seeing that dearth of talent as well on the generative AI and the AI more broadly side. So, but there's also an opportunity. Salesforce is rehiring some of the staff that was laid off earlier this year already,
Right.
with a focus around AI. So the vendors are going to really look at aggressively hiring there, even as they still, want to be a little bit leaner, focus on margin, and not hire in the way that they did leading up to 2023.
Right. Excellent. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks.
When we think about 6 months from now, when we do the next version of this market landscape, what do you think are going to be the things that have changed the most or that are going to change the entire ecosystem the most?
Oh, 2023 was about proof of concepts. A lot of that discussion and just thinking about what GenAI is and kind of going through the hype wave. What we expect to see is, and coming from both sides, coming from the buyer side, because as much as buyers have been kind of like having the FOMO, if you're missing out, and when it comes to GenAI and investing in it, their judgment has not clouded, meaning that they still want to make sure they have the right use cases. So they start to think about a roadmap of GenAI and start to think about developing, when it comes to the use cases, what are the investment priorities, and developing like a tiered approach to where they should be spending their money, which should also reflect back to how vendors should be thinking about as well when they go to market, and what are some of the commercial models they have to deploy and different pricing structure they have to deploy if it's a low-hanging fruit kind of a use case in tier versus something that's more impacting on the operations and the productivity of the enterprise, and it's involving IT systems, operations, management, and so forth. So I think the evolution of the tiered approach and from the road mapping from the buyer side will necessitate vendors to think a little bit differently how they approach those opportunities. Custom model development, I think it's something to be on the lookout for. There's an argument that custom model development could be done at the particular function level or department level because that's where the data resides, or can be specific to an industry. Question is, what would that mean to the data? How would that be managed? Who owns that data? Would it raise the silos taller, or it would actually collapse the silos faster that already exist? So that's to be seen. But I think that especially the GSIs, they still want to make their profit on the custom app development, and custom model development is the next stage of that opportunity. So those are a couple of areas that I would expect to see some more movement. But before any of that to happen, data. That's the opportunity, but the foundation requires addressing the data layer, addressing the data orchestration, the data cleansing, the management. There's a lot of foundational piece that needs to happen before any of the actual execution outcomes can occur.
So not a news story, but new urgency around cleaning up data.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Boz.
You're welcome.
Angela, for the generative AI market landscape for infrastructure and compute, what were the things that surprised you when we released that report in December?
Well, I think what really surprised me as we started looking at that market is just how incredibly quickly the demand has taken off in that space. So customers are certainly not just looking at public cloud solutions. We've seen huge backlogs across the vendors, just massive ordering that's really in comparison and contrast to the year 2023 with really conservative IT spending across all other sections of the compute and storage market. That was a really big and I think pleasant surprise to see the huge interest. What's really holding it back at this point is just the availability of supply. So that was a big surprise, and I think we're going to see more of that in 2024.
Yeah, perfect. So 2023 was all about building up that expectation, building up the desire, and now that the market has to catch up, which vendors are in the best position to take advantage of that market as you see it right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that many of the market-leading server vendors have already done a great job of taking what's in their company DNA and continuing to evolve that in the GenAI space. All of them have had a great deal of experience in AI, but now are just using the same strategies they have been using to develop additional solutions. So if you take Dell Technologies, for example, they have a great history of using validated designs, creating deep reference architectures to create blueprints to help customers adopt more quickly. They also have a great professional services business that has really come up to speed quickly on developing GenAI related advisory or consulting services to help customers in this adoption phase, because many of them are new to this area and are still developing their strategies. I think when it comes to looking at where will vendors succeed in kind of customers of all sizes and all needs, HPE and Lenovo stand out for two different reasons. So HPE has more of a cloud-centric approach, and they've developed offerings like their Green Lake for large language models offering, which is kind of straddling the IT infrastructure on-prem and also in the cloud type of solution. And Lenovo is really using their portfolio to create GenAI solutions that even a smaller enterprise who doesn't have millions to spend on AI could also take advantage of as well, all the way up to their supercomputing business. So I think we see kind of a great mix of the high end, the largest enterprise strategies, as well as other vendors who are making AI kind of more accessible to the entire market.
And then when we look at sort of the ecosystem, which we talk about a lot, you mentioned consulting. Are there certain players that you're looking at that partner really well across the ecosystem that will be able to be the best partner or a better partner or an easier partner to work with in the Gen AI space?
I think that a little bit remains to be seen in terms of who will have the best partner strategies. We see, of course, some very table stakes partnerships for all of the vendors with NVIDIA, AMD, for example. Those have to be there from a tech perspective. But then from the services side, I think it will come again back to the company's DNA. So Lenovo, for example, is taking a very ecosystem-led approach in the AI space and has invested many millions into developing their incubators to help create their partner ecosystem and help that flourish.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.
Chris, you're our principal analyst leading our telecoms practice. So generative AI and artificial intelligence in general has infected the entire technology space. So how are you looking at it from your perspectives covering telecoms?
So it's early days. We're looking at the operators and the vendor angle. So how are the operators going to ingest AI innovation, and how is that going to help them improve their solutions, improve their internal operations? And then on the vendor side, we're looking at how the vendors are using AI to improve their products, their solutions, maybe bring new products to market, and also how they're going to leverage it internally for cost optimization, getting productivity enhancement, outcomes like that. So we're really looking at it comprehensively. And we're looking at the generative AI angle, which is really the very nascent aspect, really coming from the OpenAI ChatGPT side. That really kicked that off about a year or so ago. But also the more broad, the broader AI market, which has been around already. I mean, you see it in predictive analytics, network monitoring, network operation centers. It's been incorporated in some ways already. So we're really looking at AI from a comprehensive standpoint in the telecom industry.
And I like that you said it's both use cases that are internal, but then also products they can bring to their clients, because we're seeing that across the entire technology space that we cover. So I'm curious now if there are particular companies, particular vendors that have stood out in any way over this last, and you're right, it's only been a year since this really hit us all.
So from what we've seen, the vast majority of companies in the ecosystem are at least talking about AI. Some of them are actually doing quite a bit already, experimentation, testing things, investing in R&D, really giving real thought leadership on how they think AI can change the telecom industry. Obviously, there's the hyperscalers.
Right.
They're driving this very much so.
Right.
But then it's also like the network software providers like Amdocs and Netcracker, CSG Systems. Those are players that have been talking quite a bit about AI. You've also got some of the product vendors that have already incorporated AI in some ways in their hardware. So for example, energy management, how you can dynamically and autonomously map network traffic to the radios in a network, and you can optimize how much energy is actually being used in that cell environment. So we see it on the OEM side as well. Dell has made quite a bit of noise around AI. Again, it's early days, but what we've seen is most companies in this industry are at least talking about it, and some of them are actually doing stuff with it, like talking from a roadmap standpoint and ideation standpoint. We've seen some good stuff.
And you mentioned predictive analytics and energy management, both of which seem like use cases that could be applied internally, but then definitely sold to clients. There's a broad opportunity to apply those, right? Are there any other use cases that you think are going to rise to the surface in the next year as the dominant use cases?
So customer journey and customer revenue maximization is one interesting area. This is something that the network software, the OSS, BSS providers have been talking about. How do you leverage AI to maybe autonomously infer or guide the customer maybe to more premium offerings and helping use that to maximize revenue for the telecom operators? That's a very interesting area, something that we are looking at in the report, but that would be an example.
Yeah, excellent. And I think we'll see a lot of those use cases because the whole marketing, the customer part of it too is huge across the rest of the companies that we cover. So thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you.